When my father passed, I expected grief. I expected mourning. What I didn't expect was to be erased. Not a single word, not a single explanation. Just blank stares as the will was read. And my name? Gone. In this gripping episode of Reddit Family Stories, discover how a single moment of betrayal unraveled years of hidden truths. They thought they had cast me out for good. They thought I would disappear. But fate had other plans. What you'll uncover in this unforgettable story, the chilling moment I realized my family had never truly seen me as one of them. A hidden truth so shocking it changed everything I believed. A comeback so unexpected no one, especially them, saw it coming. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't destruction. It's proving you never needed them in the first place. In this intense episode of Reddit Family Stories, witness a transformation that turns rejection into the ultimate reckoning. Ever been pushed aside by those who were supposed to love you? Tell your story below. And stay tuned for more Reddit Family Stories that prove family isn't just about blood, it's about who truly stands by you. Content. Your name isn't in the will because you were never really part of this family. That's what my mother said. In front of the lawyer, in front of my siblings, like it was some casual fact she'd been dying to throw in my face for years. I remember the way her voice didn't shake, the way her lip curled just slightly, like she was finally getting to say what she really thought of me. No one stopped her. No one even looked surprised. I sat there in silence while they divided up my father's legacy like it was leftover birthday cake. My brother got the company, my sister got the beach house, my mother got everything else. I got a nod from the lawyer and an empty envelope. At first I told myself there had to be a mistake. Maybe I'd been added to a trust. Maybe there was a second document. Maybe anything. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't about money. It was personal. And the reason? The real reason they cut me out? It wasn't written in any legal file. It was written in blood. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hearing her voice echo over and over in my head. You were never really one of us. The thing is, she didn't even say it with malice. It wasn't venomous. It was worse. It was casual, like she was stating a fact, like I should have already known. I kept thinking back to all the moments I'd brushed off over the years, the family trips I wasn't invited to, the inside jokes I never quite understood, the birthday cards that always felt impersonal. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was just the quiet one, the different one. But maybe I wasn't overthinking. Maybe I'd always been on the outside and just didn't know it. The morning after the will reading, I tried to talk to my siblings. I wanted to ask, why? Not even about the money. I just needed to understand what had happened. My sister looked me straight in the eye and said, you should be grateful you even got to be part of this family for as long as you did. Grateful. Like I'd been given some kind of charity pass to exist. My brother didn't even bother with words. He just shook his head and walked away, as if my presence was a nuisance, as if I was never meant to be part of their world. I went to the lawyer next. I asked if there was some kind of mistake, if maybe there was a trust, a clause, anything. He looked uncomfortable. There were revisions made a few weeks before your father passed, he said carefully. I wasn't involved in that part. Who was? I asked. He hesitated. His wife and the family attorney. Of course. Her. I pressed further, but he wouldn't say more. Only that the revisions were legally sound, and that there was no recourse. No recourse, no explanation. Just a quiet erasure of my existence. But that word kept repeating in my head. Revisions. That meant there had been something else. Something before. Something that included me? That night I went looking through old drawers, files, emails. I needed answers. I didn't know what I was looking for until I found it. A faded, folded copy of an older draft of the will, tucked in the back of my father's desk drawer, and there it was. My name. Clear as day. I stared at it for a long time, not crying, not shaking, just numb, because now I knew two things. One, he had planned to leave something for me, and two, someone had made damn sure that didn't happen. The next day I confronted her, the woman who raised me, the woman I had called Mom my entire life. I asked her why. She didn't deny it. She didn't cry. She just sighed and said, because it wasn't your place. What does that even mean? I demanded. She looked at me for a long moment, then said it. Cold, flat. You're not mine. It was like being slapped without warning. I felt the blood drain from my face. What? I whispered. She shrugged. You're not my child. Your father had an affair. He brought you into this family out of guilt. I tolerated it. But this? She gestured vaguely toward the mess of legal drama. This was never meant to be yours. And just like that, everything made sense. The distance, the coldness, the subtle jabs, the fake smiles. I had spent my entire life trying to belong to people who had never truly accepted me, who never intended to. It wasn't just about the will, it was about identity, legacy, bloodlines, and in their eyes, I had none. But they had no idea what I was capable of when I had nothing left to lose. When you have nothing left to lose, you stop asking for permission. You stop begging to be seen. You stop waiting for people to love you the way you deserve. You build. I left the house the next day with a single suitcase and no plan. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked away. Not because I was strong, but because I had nothing else to give them, nothing left to prove. At first, I stayed with an old college friend who didn't ask questions. Then I rented a cramped studio with peeling paint and creaky floors, but it was mine. For the first time, I wasn't living in someone else's shadow. I took a job waiting tables and freelanced as a data analyst on the side. At night, I read every book I could find on business, startups, and branding. I had an idea, one that had been sitting in the back of my mind for years, a tool for small businesses to automate their workflow. I'd shelved it before, thinking no one would ever take me seriously. But now, I didn't need anyone's approval. With the last of my savings and a small loan from a nonprofit fund for underrepresented entrepreneurs, I launched my startup. The beginning was brutal. Pitch after pitch was rejected. I burned through the loan in months, lived off ramen, cried in the shower. But I kept going. Every setback fueled me. Every no taught me how to refine my yes. In the meantime, I heard whispers about the family. The company my father had spent 40 years building, it collapsed within 18 months. My brother, who had inherited it, had no idea how to run a business. He treated it like a toy, not a legacy. He pushed out the old, experienced staff and brought in his drinking buddies. He invested in flashy tech with no ROI, expanded into areas they didn't understand, and ignored every piece of advice given to him. Suppliers walked. Long-time clients pulled contracts. Payroll was missed. Lawsuits stacked up. By the time he tried to sell the company to save what was left, no one was buying. By the second year, the business was gone. Not sold, gone. Dissolved in bankruptcy. The family home, the one my father had poured his soul into renovating brick by brick, gone too. Sold far below market value to cover debts. My sister had tried to keep it, try to turn it into a vacation rental, but her financial habits were a disaster. She maxed out credit cards, took out personal loans, and bought into shallow influencer ventures that never panned out. They didn't just lose the house. They lost the legacy. And that's what hurt the most. Not that they took what should have been mine, but that they didn't respect what was his. My father wasn't perfect. God knows he made mistakes. He hurt my mother, the woman he had a secret relationship with. He created as a child in the shadows. He let guilt drive his decisions, and silence define our relationship. But he also worked himself to the bone to build something out of nothing. He came from nothing, built the company from his garage, slept in his office for the first 2 years just to save rent, missed vacations, birthdays, even anniversaries, not out of neglect, but sacrifice. He built something real, tangible. And when he was gone, they treated it like disposable income. That anger carried me through year 3. By then, my company had traction, real traction. We got angel investors, then venture capital. I moved into an office downtown, hired a team. The product scaled faster than I could keep up. By year 4, we were profitable, featured in Forbes. I gave a TEDx talk, and every once in a while someone from the past would reach out, a cousin I hadn't heard from in years, a former classmate, even my mother's sister who once said I was a reminder of my father's shame. And then one day, I got a message from my brother. We need to talk, please. I know I don't deserve a response, but we're drowning. Mom is sick. We lost everything. I need your help. I stared at the message for a long time. I wish I could say I felt triumphant. I didn't. I felt sad. Sad that it took complete collapse for them to acknowledge me. Sad that the family name my father cared so much about was now buried under debt and shame. Sad that the house I was born in was now owned by strangers. But I also saw something else in that message. Humility. The first crack in the armor of entitlement. A few days later, I got another message, and this time from my sister. You don't have to talk to me. I just want to say I'm sorry. You deserve better. And then the unthinkable. An email from her. The woman who raised me but never accepted me. It was short. I was wrong. About everything. I hope someday you'll forgive me. I didn't reply. Not yet. Because forgiveness isn't a decision. It's a process. But for the first time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was ready to face them, not for revenge, but for something far more powerful. Closure. I didn't respond to the messages right away. There was a part of me that wanted to. Not out of kindness, but out of curiosity. I wanted to hear them say it, out loud, that they were wrong, that they regretted it, that cutting me out wasn't just cruel, but foolish. But another part of me, the quieter, more disciplined part, told me to wait, not for revenge, for clarity. It came 2 weeks later. I was sitting in my office reviewing investor reports when I got an email from a mutual connection, a former CFO from my father's company who had left shortly after my brother took over. He had always been kind to me, professional. He wrote, "I don't mean to intrude, but I thought you should know. Your father's company's name is about to be sold off at a pittance to a shell corporation. If it matters to you, this might be the only window to preserve it. Preserve it. It wasn't about money. I had enough. But that name on the wall, that legacy, it meant something." The next morning I made a call. Quiet. Discreet. My legal team contacted the selling firm through a proxy. We made an offer. 3 days later, it was mine. Not the debt, not the lawsuits, just the name, the brand, the legacy. That they didn't even know it was me. A week after that, my sister called. "We heard the company name was bought. We were hoping, do you know who bought it? Maybe they'd be open to a partnership. Help us restart things." I let her speak, let her stumble through the words. Then I said gently but firmly, "I bought it." Silence, a full 10 seconds. You bought it? But why?" "To keep it out of the hands of people who didn't respect it," I said. "To protect what Dad built." She didn't argue, didn't get defensive. She just whispered, "Fair." My brother came to see me in person 2 days later. He looked thinner, older. Like the weight of all those bad decisions, it was finally settling into his bones. He didn't make excuses, didn't beg. Just said, "I messed it up. I know I did. I don't expect anything from you, but thank you for not letting it die." We sat in silence after that. There wasn't much else to say, until he added, "You know, I used to think you didn't belong, that you were just a mistake Dad made, but looking back, I think you were the only one who actually understood him." That hit me harder than I expected. And then finally came the woman who raised me. She arrived unannounced. My assistant knocked gently before opening the door, eyes wide. "There's someone here to see you, says she's family." I nodded. "Let her in." She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but emotionally. The sharpness in her voice, the cold armor she always wore, gone. She sat across from me, hands folded in her lap. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said. I believed her. "I just wanted you to know. I was wrong. All those years. I thought I was protecting what was mine, what was ours, but I was just protecting my own pride. I let my resentment toward your mother blind me, and I hurt you because of it." I didn't speak. "Your father loved you. He was too weak to fight for you the way he should have. But he did love you. I see that now. And I'm sorry I tried to erase that." There were tears in her eyes. Real ones. And I felt everything at once. Anger, sadness, resentment, and something dangerously close to relief, because this was the woman who had raised me, who had driven me to school, bandaged my scraped knees, made me soup when I was sick. And yes, she had done those things with clenched teeth and quiet bitterness. But she had done them, and I couldn't pretend that didn't mean something. I remembered the way I always felt out of place, the subtle ways I was excluded from family traditions, the way my birthdays were downplayed, how I'd get cheaper gifts, fewer hugs, colder smiles. I remembered being 8 years old, standing in the hallway, listening to the laughter behind a closed door, and knowing without question that I wasn't invited. I carried those memories like splinters in my chest for years, but I also remembered her sitting beside my hospital bed when I had appendicitis. I remembered her defending me once in front of a teacher who had treated me unfairly. And I remembered a moment, rare but real, when she tucked my hair behind my ear and whispered, "You're stronger than you think." So yes, I had anger, I had pain, but I also had history, and somewhere buried beneath the betrayal I had affection. "Thank you for saying that," I told her quietly. "It means more than you know." She stood to leave. "Whatever you choose to do with the company, with the name, it's yours. You earned it more than any of us ever did." When she walked out, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt free. They had come to me not just for help, but for peace. Not with me, necessarily, but with themselves. And for once, I had the power to grant it. I didn't punish them. I didn't gloat. I set terms, boundaries, clear lines. The family home, I bought it back through another shell company, renovated it, restored it. Not for them, for my father. For the man who, despite his flaws, had tried. I made it a community center. A place for mentorship, for education, for growth. A new kind of legacy. Something that would outlive the bitterness. I invited them to the opening ceremony. Not as owners, not even as guests of honor, just as people. People who had lost their way, like I had once. People who needed to see that rebuilding was possible. And they came. My brother helped set up chairs. My sister brought cupcakes. She even made a speech. Awkward, sincere, apologetic. The woman who raised me stood in the back, silent, her eyes glassy. We didn't speak much that night. We didn't have to. Because sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. It's about resurrection. And sometimes the best payback is building something so good, even your enemies can't deny its worth. But more than that, it's about proving to the broken little kid inside you that they were never wrong to hope. That even if the world turns its back, you still have the power to become everything they said you couldn't. And maybe, just maybe, forgive the ones who couldn't love you the way you needed. Because healing isn't forgetting. It's choosing to build something beautiful out of the wreckage. The community center was quiet in the early morning. Sunlight poured through the restored stained glass windows of what used to be the family room, now a learning hub filled with books, laptops, and hand-painted murals made by local kids. I walked through the hall slowly, letting my fingers trail along the wooden banister my father once sanded by hand. The scent of fresh coffee and newly printed paper filled the air. This place had once been filled with tension, secrets, and unspoken grief. Now, it was filled with purpose. I stood in the doorway of what used to be my childhood bedroom. It had been converted into a reading room painted in warm tones. On the wall, a small plaque read, "In honor of those who were left out, but never gave up." That line had come to me one night while journaling. It stayed with me, because for years, I had been the one left out, the one overlooked, underestimated, resented. But I didn't let that define me. They had cut me out of the will, but I had reclaimed the legacy. They had erased me from their story, but I had written a new one. I saw my sister helping a child pick out a book in the next room. My brother was painting a bench outside with 2 volunteers, and she, the woman who once saw me as a burden, was sitting in the corner reading softly to a toddler whose mother was in class down the hall. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was an honest one. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to stop carrying the weight of someone else's mistakes. It means understanding that people can be both wrong and redeemable. My father made mistakes. My family made worse ones. But I chose not to let those wounds decide the rest of my life. I chose to build, to give, to grow. And in doing so, I gave them and myself a second chance. Blood may not always define family, but character, grace, and resilience do. Even when you're written out of someone else's ending, you still have the power to write your own beginning. And sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't.